I had not slept in 63 hours when I finally admitted that I was afraid. My name is Valith Suncoil. I have served as royal physician to the Obsidian Throne for 400 years. I have treated plasma burns that consumed entire limbs. I have restarted furnace hearts that had gone cold on the battlefield. I have looked into the eyes of dying emperors and kept my voice steady, but standing in the hatching sanctum on the third day, listening to that sound, I was afraid in a way I had never been before. The Empress's egg had hatched 72 hours earlier, the first royal clutch in 900 years. A daughter. The continuation of a bloodline older than most stars in this sector. Every system in the sovereignty had celebrated. Ships had fired their engines in salute. Entire planets had dimmed their lights so their people could watch the broadcast of the hatching. No one was celebrating now. The hatchling would not stop crying. It was not the sharp, healthy screech of a newborn dragonette. I had heard that sound 1,000 times, and it was always beautiful in its fury, full of fire and demand. This was something else entirely. This was a low, keening wail that rose and fell without pause, without breath, without end. It moved through the walls of the sanctum like something alive. 2 of my attendants had begun bleeding from their ear slits on the second day. I sent them away and stayed. I tried everything. I want you to understand that. I tried everything my 4 centuries of knowledge could offer. The hearth-fire bond was first. Standard protocol. The Empress held her daughter against her furnace heart for 6 hours straight, pouring warmth and resonance into that tiny body. Every draconid child bonds this way. The mother's internal fire speaks to the hatchling's own ember, and the two synchronize, and the child knows it is safe. It is the oldest ritual our species has. The hatchling screamed louder. The Empress's scales cracked from the effort of maintaining her output, and still the little one thrashed and wailed. The Empress set her down with shaking claws and looked at me, and in her ancient golden eyes I saw something I had never seen there before. Helplessness. I tried resonance chambers next. 7 Bondseer elders, myself included, surrounded the hatchling and pulsed calming frequencies into the air around her. These frequencies have soothed our kind for millennia. They are as fundamental to us as breathing. The hatchling's distress shattered the field within minutes. 2 of my colleagues collapsed with broken harmonics and had to be carried out. I flooded the sanctum with brooding scent, the chemical signature that tells a hatchling it is in a safe nest, that its mother is near. Nothing. I offered plasma milk. She refused it. Her tiny body was beginning to dehydrate. Her scales, which should have been hardening into their first color by now, remained thin and translucent, like wet paper stretched over glass. On the second night, the Emperor ordered me to sedate her. I refused. Sedating a newborn whose furnace heart has not yet stabilized could stop it entirely. He overruled me. I administered the dose with steady hands and a sick feeling in my chest. It had no effect. She metabolized it instantly and kept crying. I did not tell anyone what I was truly thinking. I had seen this before. Once. 3 centuries ago. A hatchling that could not bond. We called it Valshira, which translates roughly as cold-hearted, though it is not meant as cruelty. It is a diagnosis. The furnace heart simply never catches. It flickers and dims, and the hatchling fades, and there is nothing anyone can do. That hatchling died on the 5th day. This one was on day 3. The Emperor summoned me to the throne hall that evening. He is a being the size of a warship hull, plated in black gold scales, with plasma bleeding in thin lines between his teeth. He spoke quietly, which was worse than shouting. He told me that if the hatchling died, the bloodline ended, the sovereignty would fracture. The warlord houses would turn on each other within a decade. Billions of lives across 200 star systems depended on this one tiny creature, learning how to stop crying. He told me to fix it. I returned to the sanctum and stood over the warming slab and looked down at her. She was barely the size of a human house cat. Her wings were folded wrong, crumpled against her sides like wet cloth. Her mouth was open, and that terrible sound poured out of her without end. Through her translucent scales I could see her furnace heart, flickering weak and uneven, like a candle flame in wind. I could not fix what I did not understand, so I did something I had never done before. I went to the archives and opened the xenobiology files. Every species we had ever contacted, every record of neonatal bonding across the known galaxy. I read through dozens of entries. The Velkari bond through mathematical resonance patterns. The Esarathi use chemical imprinting. The Thalmir synchronize bioelectric fields, variations on the same mechanisms my own people use. None of them offered anything new. Then I reached the human file. I almost skipped it. Humans are classified as Tier 9 in our contact registry. Primitive, soft-bodied, short-lived. A small diplomatic delegation of theirs lives in the lower levels of our citadel, and most of my people barely notice they are there. I had never had reason to study their biology in any detail, but I was desperate, so I read. I learned about something called skin-to-skin contact. Humans place their premature infants directly against bare skin to regulate the child's heartbeat and temperature. They call it kangaroo care. I learned that human infants who are denied physical touch will weaken and die, even if they are fed and kept warm. There is a medical term for it: failure to thrive. The word sat strangely in my mind. A species whose children could die from loneliness. Then I read about lullabies. I did not understand the concept at first. It appeared to be a form of singing, but not for communication, not a mating call, not a territorial signal, not a warning or a summons. It was singing for no purpose except to make a small, frightened creature feel less alone. Humans had been doing it for tens of thousands of years, long before they had language complex enough to explain why. I sat in the archive for a long time after that. I thought about the hatchling on the warming slab, crying into a room full of fire and resonance and ancient power, and none of it reaching her. I thought, what if she does not need fire? What if she needs something we do not have, something we have never needed? It was past midnight when I reached the human embassy. I had never been to the lower tiers before. The corridors were warm in a way that had nothing to do with plasma or furnace hearts. It was a soft, organic warmth. It smelled like living things. I found Dr. Alara Vasquez in her quarters. She was the embassy's medical officer. A woman in her middle years by human standards, with dark hair and calm, steady eyes. She was awake, reading on a datapad, wearing clothes that looked impossibly soft. I explained the situation. I kept my voice clinical and precise. I framed it as a research inquiry, not a plea. I told her about the hatchling. I told her about the bonding failure. I told her about the 63 hours. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked one question. Can I hold her? No non-draconid had ever touched a royal hatchling. It was not forbidden by law. It was simply something no one had ever imagined would be necessary. There was no rule against it because there was no precedent for it. I said yes. The sound hit us in the corridor before we reached the sanctum. Ilara flinched, but she did not stop walking. Inside, the room was a ruin. Shattered resonance crystals littered the floor. Scorch marks streaked the walls where the Empress's grief had vented plasma. Exhausted attendants lined the edges of the room, and on the warming slab, that tiny creature lay curled in on herself, wailing. The guards shifted when Ilara approached. I raised one claw, and they held their position. Ilara removed her jacket. She rolled up her sleeves. She reached down with her bare hands, and I almost stopped her. The hatchling's scales, even as thin as they were, radiated enough heat to burn human skin on contact. Ilara picked her up anyway. She lifted the hatchling and settled her against her chest. The dragonette's claws, no bigger than thorns, pricked through her shirt. Her scales pressed against Ilara's collarbone and left thin red lines. Ilara did not flinch. She did not make a sound. The crying hitched. For the first time in 63 hours, there was a break in that wail. A stutter. A pause. Ilara adjusted her hold. One hand cradled the hatchling's spine, the other cupped under her haunches, pressing the tiny body against the place where her own heartbeat was strongest. The hatchling went rigid, her head tilted. She was listening. I understood then what she was hearing. Not a furnace roar. Not a plasma pulse. A heartbeat. Wet and organic and rhythmic, steady as rainfall, warm as sunlight. A sound no draconid has ever made. A sound this hatchling had never heard, and yet somehow recognized. And then, Ilara began to hum. It was not a song, not a melody I could identify or catalog. It was just a low, steady, tuneless vibration that came from her chest and her throat, and passed directly through skin and scale into the tiny body she held. It was the simplest sound in the universe. It meant nothing. It carried no data, no frequency pattern, no chemical signature. It said, I am here. You are not alone. The hatchling made a small sound, a chirp, barely audible after 3 days of screaming, and she stopped crying. The silence was so sudden and so absolute that one of the guards dropped his lance. It clattered against the stone floor, and nobody moved to pick it up. Nobody breathed. I stood there, 400 years of training and knowledge rendered completely useless, and watched a human woman hold a dragon and hum. Through the hatchling's translucent scales, I could see her furnace heart. It had been flickering erratically for 3 days, threatening to go out. Now it steadied. The rhythm changed. It did not take on the deep, roaring pulse of a draconid furnace. It matched the heartbeat of the woman holding her. Small, steady, mortal, stubborn. Color bled into the hatchling's scales for the first time. Not the black gold of her father. Not the deep crimson of her mother. A soft, pearlescent rose gold. A color that had never appeared in the royal bloodline in all of recorded history. The hatchling closed her eyes. Her claws retracted. She tucked her head beneath Alara's chin and let out a long, shuddering breath, and then she slept. The Empress arrived within the hour. I expected fury. I expected to see this human incinerated, where she stood for daring to touch the royal heir. Instead, the Empress, a being who could have leveled the citadel with a single breath, lowered her enormous head until her eye was level with Alara's face. She watched her daughter sleeping against this stranger's chest. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she asked me, "Why does it work?" I told her the truth. I did not fully know, but I believed that the hatchling's furnace heart needed something our species does not possess. Not fire, not resonance, a rhythm. And humans are the only known species in the galaxy that carries a rhythm in their chest from the moment they are born until the moment they die. Alara stayed that night. She slept in the sanctum, the hatchling curled on her chest. By morning, the little one fed for the first time, taking plasma milk while cradled in Alara's arms. I examined Alara's burns afterward. They were significant. 2nd degree across her chest and forearms, angry red welts in the shape of tiny scales. I offered dermal regeneration immediately. She refused. I asked her why. She said, "Because she will wake up if I move." 3 days later, the hatchling was declared stable. Her furnace heart beat strong, though its rhythm remained unusual, slower than any draconid on record, almost mammalian in its pace. The Empress granted the naming right to Alara. This was unprecedented. It caused an uproar among the noble houses that I will not bother describing, because I found their outrage tiresome and irrelevant. Alara named her Solène. She told me it was an old Earth name that meant solemn and dignified. She said she chose it because in all those days of crying, the hatchling had never screamed in anger, only in loneliness. The Empress spoke the name aloud, and the word ignited in plasma script above the sanctum, burning itself into the royal registry for all eternity. Solène of the Obsidian Throne, I have studied every species in the known galaxy. I have catalogued their strengths with the precision my profession demands. The Draconid have fire and time. The Velkari have logic and patience. The Sorathi have cunning and adaptability. Humans have none of these things. They are small. They are soft. They burn easily. And they die so quickly that by our standards their entire lives are barely a drawn breath. But they are the only species I have ever encountered that will hold something that is hurting them and refuse to let go. They are the only species that invented a word for the act of singing a frightened creature to sleep. They are the only species whose children can die from not being touched. I think that is why the hatchling chose her. Not because Dr. Vasquez was warm, not because her heartbeat was the right frequency, but because when Solène was crying and the entire sovereignty stood paralyzed by power and protocol and 4,000 years of tradition, Ilara Vasquez walked into a room full of dragons, picked up a creature that was burning her alive, and decided that the pain mattered less than the loneliness. I have served the Obsidian Throne for 4 centuries. I have seen wars ended and stars extinguished. I have never seen anything braver than that. Last week, I passed the sanctum on my way to the archives. Through the observation window, I saw Solène. She is larger now. Her rose-gold scales catch the light like liquid metal, and her furnace heart glows strong and steady beneath them. She was curled in Alara's lap, fast asleep. Alara was reading something on her datapad with one hand. The other rested on the hatchling's spine, her fingers tracing slow, absent circles across those warm scales. She was humming. I stood there for a while, watching. Then I continued on my way, carrying with me a quiet certainty that I will hold for the rest of my long, long life. We are the oldest civilization in the galaxy. We command fire and plasma and the void between stars. We have conquered worlds and built empires that span centuries. But we never thought to sing our children to sleep. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about why the galaxy needs humans.